Today, this video that I'm providing you guys is to make healthy, delicious sourdough bread. How do I build up a very active and a very strong levain? One, the hotter it is in the room, the faster the activation will be. The second point that I want to tell you is the ratio. So if your ratios are, when you're feeding the levain, 1-1-1, it will rise a specific weight, let's call it 3 hours if it's on the counter. But if you actually decrease the amount of levain, so putting a ratio of 1-4-4, which is the ratio that I use most of the time, then it will rise way more slowly. So the higher the ratio, and the faster the levain will rise. Another thing to know is they're hungry. Those guys are super hungry all the time. So the more you feed it, the more active it will be. If you are like me, busy person for whatever reason, and you don't want to make bread every single day, then you're going to be using a bit of the fridge in order to slow down the process and then just to let it rest a little bit, which means you can just feed it once a week or twice a week, and then right after feeding it, you just put it in the fridge. The first tool that you're going to need is a place where to store your levain. I have only 2 of those, and I transfer once in a while. So every month I will transfer from one to another. The second, you're going to need a blade. So the blade will come up very useful when you're going to be scoring the bread. I've tried many different blades. This one I think is like more specific to bread, and I actually don't like it. I prefer those blades that you can find in any comment on dit quincaillerie en anglais?
J'ai aucune idée.
So you can find in any hardware store those type of blades. They cut really well, and this is the option you should go with. You also have bannetons. Those are half a kilo, I think. So you can have basically the shape, or you can have more of an oval shape. So those are the ones. You're gonna need 2 glass containers. And final, this is the Dutch oven. So this you can find probably for 10 bucks in the Value Village. So let's talk for a minute about the ingredients. So the first, there's actually 3 main ingredients. Obviously they are like the water, the salt, and the flour. But before jumping into this, you really have to know that your best tools and ingredient will be time and temperature. If in your house it's 22 degrees, 23, or even maybe 25 degrees, then just know that things will actually speed up. Okay, so another very good ally or friend in terms of like the ingredient aspect will be time. So obviously the more time you have, the more you let the dough really sink in the levain, the better your bread will be. Okay, let's jump into the actual ingredients. First is to have water that will not affect the levain. So my tap water does affect the levain. There's 2 options that I use. So either I will use that water, but I will let rest the water for at least 24 hours. So I will have a big bottle like that, fill it up, and in the morning then I will use this water. Or you can boil it. So that's another option, which is probably the option that I use the most. Second ingredient, the flour. And what I like to do as well is, like, people will tell you, oh, you need this type of flour or whatever. Honestly, take the flour you like. I personally love spelt. I think it has a phenomenal taste to it. So I will always add more or less 5 to 10 to 15 to 20% flour of spelt, and then use a more general flour to it. And the third ingredient, the salt. Many options there. The only thing I would recommend you not to use is table salt. It has a mineral into it that can interact. So you can also use, this is what, Himalayan pink salt. You can use sea salt. Those are all good options. I'm finding this one to be quite light in terms of, so I always have to put a little bit more of this one versus this one that is the Himalayan salt. But honestly, anything goes as long as it's not table salt. So now we're gonna be feeding our levain. So I'm gonna take a container. I usually don't clean this container all the time, so if it was just me, I will basically just reuse this container. But once, I don't know, a month, you actually have to clean it because it's a bacteria and you want to start fresh. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna be basically using the leftover of levain. So we have 24 grams of levain. Now I'm going to add some filtered water. I always use 60 grams. And now I'm going to be putting some flour to the same amount. So let's call it another 60, but I actually went over a bit, so 63. So I'm going to go and put 63. I absolutely love spelt, so I just put a little bit of it. I'm going to be mixing, and I'm finding that the levain is actually in very good shape when you integrate a lot of air in it. So let's just really mix it. And you want to have this consistency. One of the key things, that you have to remember is you want to measure. If this is the first time for you, or you want to have a gauge, place an elastic like this to where the levain is at right now, and then you're going to know that when it triples, it basically has reached its peak. I'm going to start right now the autolyse. We're right now 6 a.m. in the morning, so I'm going to mix the flour and the water, and I'm going to let this sit for a good 2 hours. So what do we need? You would need a container like this. You're also going to need your scale and also something to cover up. Okay, and I'm going to put some flour in this. So 950 gram of amazing flour here. So 850-ish. So, and I'm gonna add a little bit of spelt flour. So I'm gonna put just a bit of it, so I'm actually reaching the 950 grams of flour. Then when this is done, it's time to add the water. So you're gonna take your filtered water, and then you're just gonna mix that together. We're gonna be adding 720 grams of filtered water, and then we'll let it sit for 2 hours. See you at 8 a.m. We are now integrating our levain into the dough. So we're just gonna open this guy and pour the levain into the dough. I'm basically just going here with a knife. I always use a knife, by the way. So the amount that I'm pouring in is close to 100 grams, more or less. As long as you have between 100 to 150, you should be fine. And this is basically the leftover levain that I'm gonna need to start refeeding it. Here you go. So you have my little machine here that's gonna do the work for me. In terms of time, I'm saying 2 minutes mixing, but honestly, if you're doing it by hand, double the time or even triple the time. We're gonna go slowly. And now the levain will be integrating itself slowly into the dough. Now the dough and the levain is integrated together, so I'm just gonna let this sit basically a little bit, a good 20 minutes I want to say. So the reason why I'm wetting my hands is just because the dough doesn't stick as much when your hands are wet. We're gonna give you a little rest for 20 minutes. Let's set some salt. So you're gonna take your scale and you're gonna take a small container, and then we're gonna put aside 20 grams of salt. 20 grams. Stop. Now we're ready to integrate the salt into the dough with the levain. So to do that, I'm gonna need some oil, olive oil. I'm gonna need my salt that I set aside earlier. And now we're gonna basically just dump that beautiful dough into the counter. I just wetted my hands with water. And now I'm basically scraping the dough, so it's just easier with my hands. So it's easier to into that beautiful surface. I usually don't clean that guy every single time because I do bread very often. So I'm just gonna let it sit right here and then tell him, see you next week. So here's the salt. Now I'm gonna put the salt right here all over the dough. And now, this is my secret. I put a little bit of olive oil all over my hand, and we're gonna start massaging that dough so the salt gets fully integrated into the dough. So if you feel like your dough is a bit stiff, it will be a good moment for you to add some water. So you're gonna basically do this until the salt is fully integrated into the dough. I'm getting close to this, and it's been maybe a minute of shaping. We're gonna divide the dough in two similar pieces and we're gonna let it rest. So to do that, I'm gonna need 2 containers. So here they are, 2 glass containers with a lid. So I'm gonna use my scraper, and with my wet hands, I'm basically gonna wet this guy a little bit, and then let's just cut it. So now we're just gonna roll and shape a little bit those pieces, and we're gonna dump it into the container. There's probably 2 hours that just passed before I dropped the dough into those containers, glass containers. So right now we're gonna basically do the first stretch and fold. I'm gonna wet my hands, and as soon as I'm done, I'm basically just gonna wrap the dough and fold it within itself. My hands are fully wet. I go on the side, I go on the other side here. And the idea is just to remove basically the dough from the surface of the container. So I'm gonna hug it and then pull it in, and then hug it and then pull the dough. Let's go on the other side, hug it, pull it in, and then hug it, pull it in. And now the last round, and then here, and then here. Any superficial bubbles like this are not wanted, so I'm just gonna pop them because they're made because of the folds and not actually because of the levain. Here we go. So we close this one and then we do the second one. It's been 2 hours now. Those guys have been resting, and now we're gonna do the second stretch and fold. I just did the third stretch and fold, which is the last stretch and fold. So we're gonna let those loaves rest for another hour or 2. So I'm gonna shape the bread in order for them to be resting in the fridge. So I'm gonna use those bannetons. So what I'm gonna do, I basically just gonna sparkle a bit of flour right here. And then we're gonna gently put the dough on the counter. Good, time to shape those babes for final proofing. It's almost like a stretch and fold, but this time you're stretching and folding into a ball. Make sure the skin is tight, and you want to make circular motions like this to achieve that. You flour them and then you place them into the bannetons for overnight proofing. So here we are now with the second loaf, and then from one side, and obviously you don't want to pull so it rips, so you want to pull gently enough so the dough is basically being just gently pulled here. Squeeze it, and then squeeze it here. And now we're just gonna cover both of the breads with plastic. So we're gonna let this rest on the counter for 1 hour, just for the dough to basically form itself together. And then we're gonna put it in the fridge for the rest of the night. So here we are. So this is the parchemin. So I cut basically kind of a square piece, and then you just integrate it in it. This is how they should be looking. Okay, so we're gonna be putting a bit of flour on top of them. Now we're gonna drop the breads in the Dutch oven. Here we are, so we're just about to score the breads. The main rule is to go fast, sharp. It will allow the bread to have a great opening once it's going to be baking. And that's about it. So we're going to be adding just a few eggs here. I have 4. And then we're going to let this bake. Perfect, we're ready to put them in the oven. Time to set a timer for 23 minutes. Now we're gonna turn off the actual heat and then just put it to 450. And now we're gonna be just removing a little cover. And then let it bake for another 23 minutes. So time has come to bake so I'm turning the oven off. And now we're gonna be taking them out. So here they are. Perfect. So I'm gonna take them out. So it's been just a 2 minutes, but I want to show you a bit the bread. And this one is the second one. So the one that we add the ice. Now we're gonna be waiting for 1 hour before slicing them. So here we go. We're gonna be slicing it. This is always a fun time to see how the bread ends.